What is up, tea nerds? In this video, we're going to be talking about my caffeine addiction, where the term tea drunk came from and what it means, and how to avoid a tea hangover. And then finally talking about figuring out if your teas are bad or if you've just been brewing them in a way that don't feel good with your body. My name is Dart. I'm one of the co-owners of Our Teaware, and on this channel, we do teaware education, tea reviews, and a podcast around tea. So it wasn't until honestly about 5 years into drinking tea that I realized I was addicted to caffeine. And part of the reason is I didn't really drink many other things with caffeine in them and wasn't typically affected by caffeine, or so I thought. When I drank pop, I could drink it right before night, or energy drinks, they didn't keep me up. And then I rarely drank coffee, so I just really didn't have any need for caffeine. Like everyone else, tea started as a casual hobby for me until just one day it wasn't, and I was brewing tea every single day. I don't need tea for energy. I've never needed coffee for energy or anything like that to wake me up in the morning. It's not that. It's the subtle like headaches that I get when I haven't had any caffeine from just drinking tea every single day. Because I drink tea because I love it, some of the practical tips around caffeine don't really make sense in my daily life. And so I want to share some of those with you. Okay. So the term tea drunk, or 茶醉, 茶literally meaning tea, and then 醉 to mean drunk or intoxicated. So when we say tea drunk, it comes from that root, but honestly, it's more like a tea high. We're talking about the feeling that you get when you drink tea and your body just feels like it's in a different state. So it's just the feeling of after drinking lots of or really strong harsh teas. Now, if you've ever only had a tea bag and grew up like me where you had tea all the time, but it was sweet tea or other things that use lower quality bag tea, you're not gonna have this experience no matter how much tea you drink. So whether it's the L-theanine, the caffeine, the qi, I'm not a doctor, I honestly don't know what it exactly is, but I know that when I'm drinking high-grade loose-leaf teas, I get this feeling, and a lot of other people do as well. In fact, there's a company called Tea Drunk. But this is only gonna come from teas that do have caffeine in them, Camellia sinensis teas, and you'll hear people making the distinction saying herbal teas aren't teas because it doesn't come from a varietal of a Camellia sinensis plant, and honestly, that's not really important. What's important is knowing it won't happen. You won't get tea drunk unless it's a Camellia sinensis tea. If you're like, dude, what are you talking about? So some examples, chamomile, mint, hibiscus, rooibos, these all are not Camellia sinensis plants, so you just won't get that feeling. So I already mentioned that it's more like being high than it is like being drunk in actuality. And the reason is there's a more attentiveness. You get this energy, but it feels like your whole body. It's not like coffee where it's concentrated in your chest. So your whole body just feels a little bit tingly and calm, but more aware, which reminds me more of being high than drunk, because when you're drunk, you kind of lose that awareness. For me personally, harsher teas like Dansong oolongs or sheng pu'ers get me to tea drunk faster. But let me know in the comments which tea gets you tea drunk the fastest. When I started drinking tea more and more, it was also when I was biking religiously, like 15 to 20 hours a week. So I cared about my sleep cycle each and every day because it actually affected me. Now I have 2 kids and my own company, so consistent sleep has been put on a little bit of a back burner for a few years. So when I was drinking tea and then looking at the effects of the tea and the caffeine, my sleep cycle, basically everything said, don't drink tea after 3 p.m. And honestly, really, if you don't want the effects of the caffeine half-life, then really 12 hours before you go to bed, you should stop drinking tea. You guys heard me say I have 2 kids, correct? I go to bed between 8 and 10, which means I'd have to stop drinking tea after breakfast for that to work. So while it may be great in theory, practically that just doesn't make sense, especially when a lot of tea houses are open during the day or in the evening, not at 8 a.m. There's also plenty of people in China who drink tea all day long. So let's talk about some of those practical ways to actually navigate that. Also, if you guys love this teapot that I'm drinking with, the Sunken Treasure, it's from one of our new featured artists. He ran Xiehua's studio for years in Chaozhou, and he does these really stylized Chaozhou Juni pots. Super cool, available in our store. If those words all sounded like gibberish to you, go check out this video. It's a podcast of me and Derek talking about the background of Chaozhou and the clay revitalization in Chaozhou. Okay, so the first recommendation is to not double drink harsh teas and not drink them right before bed. So as you get drinking tea more and more, you'll realize there are teas that hit you a lot harder and faster. Again, Dansong oolongs and sheng pu'ers are 2 to give an example. So when I say don't double drink them, don't drink them back to back right before bed if you want to be able to not feel, 1, have your stomach hurt, and 2, like you're not gonna get any sleep. I have a personal story. I did this one time when we were recording a podcast. I got some new matcha in that somebody had asked me to try out. And so I had a bowl of matcha before the podcast and then drank some gongfu during the podcast. And when I went to bed, I was literally laying there. My whole body just like, not like actually shaking, but it just felt like I was buzzing. I got to sleep pretty quickly because I don't really have trouble getting to sleep. But when I woke up, I didn't feel like I slept at all because my body was still jittery and still felt like it was alive. The next tip is don't drink bad teas or teas with bad qi. It really doesn't matter how you look at it, but there are going to be teas that regardless of how they taste are just gonna not feel good for you and your body. What is the feeling that you're looking for? It's this feeling of cloudiness or haziness instead of clarity. Your stomach will hurt or you'll get like an immediate headache as soon as you start. These are all mild effects, but when you're drinking tea all the time, you'll start to notice them more and more. So if you have a tea, regardless of how good it tastes, just pitch it. Or better yet, give it to a friend and see if they have that feeling. Because tea affects each of our bodies differently, so even though it may hit you in a bad way, it may not have an effect on somebody else. This is not me saying give all your bad teas to your friend. But, and this is what I was talking about at the beginning of the video, is it that the tea is bad or that you're brewing it wrong? And I'm not actually even talking about the steeping, I'm just talking about the sequencing. Harsh teas, shengpu'er, dansongs, matcha, they will hurt your stomach if you don't have any food in them. So make sure you eat something before you're drinking any of them if you don't want to have adverse effects. It's one of those subtle nuances where a good tea with no food will actually have a similar effect to a bad tea or a tea that doesn't vibe well with your body. So make sure you have food in you, and if you want to feel what that bad feeling feels like, drink some harsh tea with no food, and that'll tell you right away if you're into that. I don't care how mild or refined, I don't care if it's an aged gongfu. Now, of course there are exceptions, but by and large, just stick away from those harsh teas at night. So what teas should you be looking for at night? Those evening teas, you can grab pretty much any white tea and it'll be okay. Red teas or hongcha, right? Black tea as we say in English is always good. Green teas, if you have a little bit or some milder ones, they work, but green teas can definitely get pretty hopping as well. And if it feels too intimidating to discern like which type of tea is gonna be harsh or mild, just grab an herbal tea, right? Grab that chamomile or that mint or whatever else you have, because those obviously, they're caffeine free, so you're not gonna have to worry about it at all. Now that we picked the tea for the time of day and making sure it doesn't hurt our body, check out this video, which is gonna tell you how to pick out your first teapot. Anyway, I gotta drink some more tea.